Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Heart Healthy Eating Nutrition Education Session, Part 1. This is Part 1 of the two-part Heart Healthy Eating Education sessions. However, it does not matter which order you listen to these recordings in. My name's Danielle, and I am a dietitian at Minto-Mapleton Family Health Team, primarily working out of the Drayton site. In this session, we'll be talking about what cardiovascular disease is, and then we'll be getting into the topics about eating for heart health. So this includes things like caffeine, alcohol, supplements, learning how to read nutrition facts tables properly, exercise, and then we'll talk about goal setting towards the end. Cardiovascular diseases are a group of disorders of the heart and the blood vessels that are commonly referred to as heart disease or stroke. So according to the World Heart Federation, cardiovascular disease is the world's #1 killer. So you can see the stats are that about 33% of all global deaths are related to cardiovascular disease. So if we compare that to cancers or respiratory diseases or even HIV, you can see that cardiovascular disease is the main cause of global deaths. Some of the risk factors for cardiovascular disease include things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, overweight and obesity, things to do with air pollution or air quality in the area that you're living in. Physical inactivity is a big piece. Obviously, the unhealthy diet, which is what we're going to be talking about in more detail today. Diabetes, tobacco use, kidney disease, and then also the harmful or the excessive intake of alcohol. So first off, we're going to be talking about caffeine and specifically what the effects of excessive caffeine intake are on the heart. So first off, excessive caffeine intake can increase the resting heart rate and also increase your blood pressure. They may also cause some heart palpitations if you're consuming too much caffeine. It can increase that risk for dehydration because it increases the frequency of urination. It can also increase symptoms of anxiety. So I mentioned those heart palpitations that link to anxiety and caffeine. And an excessive intake of caffeine also is linked with an increased intake of added sugars, specifically because of those energy drinks or some more of those fancy coffees, which tend to have more of those added sugars. So how much caffeine is considered safe? So according to Health Canada, they suggest that up to 400 milligrams of caffeine is considered safe. Specifically in the form of coffee, coffee is rich in antioxidants, which is actually recommended or encouraged for that cardiovascular protection. So about 1 cup of coffee is about 100 milligrams of caffeine. So if you're drinking about 4 cups of coffee per day, you'll be within those guidelines of about 400 milligrams per day. It's also important to recognize other sources of caffeine in your diet, so potentially tea or pops, energy drinks, things like that. Those all equal your total of caffeine in a day. So coffee, which is a common form of caffeine that people consume on a regular basis, is actually quite high in an antioxidant called polyphenols. And these polyphenols help to fight inflammation that's going on in the body. So they can have lots of protection against certain metabolic diseases, including cardiovascular disease. Also things like diabetes and liver disease. So coffee is actually encouraged in order to get that antioxidant properties to help fight inflammation. The problem isn't necessarily caffeine itself. It's usually what tends to come with caffeine sources. So as I mentioned, energy drinks or coffee with extra sugar. It's not the caffeine necessarily, it's more so those added sugars, which tend to have more of a harm on the cardiovascular health. At the end of the day, it's always important to keep moderation in mind. Enjoying your morning, afternoon, or even evening coffee as needed is totally fine. Just remember to keep in mind all of the other sources of potential caffeine you might be consuming in a day and trying as much as possible to keep it around that 400 milligrams per day. So now we're going to get into the topic of alcohol and how excessive alcohol intake can have an impact on cardiovascular health. So specifically excessive alcohol, so well over the recommendations, excessive intake of alcohol can lead to inflammation in the body. And when the body's in a constant state of inflammation, that's when chronic diseases are at much higher risk. So, inflammation means an impaired antioxidant defense, so you have less of an immune response to foreign bodies or inflammation that's going on in the body. It may also interfere with your sleep quality. It can increase your blood pressure. It can increase that risk for cardiomyopathy, which means weakening of the heart muscles. And a major one when it comes to nutrition is it increases the risk for dehydration and malnutrition because alcohol intake is compromising your intake of vitamins and minerals and also fluids, right? Not drinking as much water because you're consuming more alcohol. So that's one of the major risks with excessive alcohol intake as well. So, what's considered excessive when it comes to alcohol intake? So, essentially, the Canadian Centre for Substance Use and Addiction put together these guidelines that helps to determine your risk for illness or alcohol related consequences based off of how many drinks of alcohol you consume per week. So, obviously, no drinks per week means there's no risk of those alcohol related consequences or illness. And what's considered excessive when it comes to alcohol intake is considered 7 or more drinks per week. So essentially, 1 drink per evening puts you in that high risk category, which also means that your alcohol intake is considered excessive. Now, there's different standard drinks that help to determine how many drinks you consume per week. So, essentially, one standard drink is equal to all of the items listed on the screen here. So, one drink would be equal to about a 12-ounce, 5% alcoholic content beer, would also be a 12-ounce, 5% alcoholic content cooler or cider, about a 5-ounce glass of wine with about a 12% alcohol content, and then 1.5 ounces of a spirit or a distilled alcohol around that 40% alcohol content. So each one of these is considered one standard drink. So thinking about the amount that you consume and whether or not it equals one standard drink. So cutting back on alcohol can improve both your short-term and your long-term health. So less alcohol can mean better sleep, improved mood, reduced risk of certain cancers, less strain on the liver, and also less strain on the heart. So even small reductions like having some alcohol-free days or cutting back your drinking target from 7 to 5 can make a huge difference. So no matter where you are on this continuum, for your health, less alcohol is better. So now we're going to get into the topic of different nutrition supplements. So first off, nutrients should always be prioritized through foods first or whole foods if able. So those whole foods include things like fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, proteins. They all provide a wide range of nutrients, including vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants, and lots of other beneficial compounds. Together, these nutrients work in the body in ways that supplements cannot actually really fully replicate. Although whole foods may seem less convenient, they are often less expensive than supplements and they provide more overall nutritional value. A balanced diet can meet the nutrient needs of most individuals without the need for routine supplementation. Another important safety note is that it's much harder to overconsume nutrients from food alone, whereas high dose supplementation can sometimes lead to excessive intake or some unwanted side effects. So it's important to prioritize getting your nutrients from food first whenever possible and use supplementation when there is a specific need or recommendation from your dietitian or healthcare provider. So the first type of supplement that we're going to be talking about when it comes to heart health is omega-3 fatty acids, also known as fish oil supplements. So these omega-3 fatty acids are an essential type of dietary fat. Our body cannot make them, unfortunately, in sufficient amounts, so we must get our intake from food alone. They play a very important role in heart health and brain function. They help to reduce our triglycerides in the blood. They can actually increase the good cholesterol, so that HDL that's in the bloodstream. They help to reduce inflammation in the body, and they can actually help to support eye health as well. Types of fatty fish actually provide a very sufficient amount of omega-3s in the diet. So things like salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies, herring, those are all examples of fatty fish sources that give the body the recommended amount of omega-3s. Typically, it's recommended to consume those types of fatty fishes 2 to 3 times per week. So 2 to 3 palm-sized servings of fatty fish per week gives you that recommended amount of omega-3s in a given week. When it comes to an omega-3 supplement, it's important to note that a supplement is not going to have the exact same impact in the body as omega-3s from whole foods, because those whole foods contain protein and they contain other essential nutrients that are also important for health. However, if you're not consuming that recommended amount of omega-3s, so 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week, an omega-3 supplement is considered safe. There's no harm in consuming that, especially when it's about 1,000 milligrams of those fish oils or omega-3s per day. It's also important to note that supplementing with an over-the-counter omega-3 supplement does not reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease or reduce your risk of death from all causes. It just provides your body with that recommended EPA and DHA, which is the special form of omega-3, in order to help to support your health overall. Another very important nutrient when it comes to cardiovascular health is calcium. So not only does calcium help to support your bones and your teeth, it also helps with muscle function. And your heart is a main muscle in the body. So making sure that you're consuming enough calcium on a regular basis is important to help with that heart function, muscle function, and those cardiac rhythms. The recommended intake of calcium is about 1,000 milligrams per day. Now, that does increase in women over the age of 50 to about 1,200 milligrams per day, and then it increases in men over the age of 70 to about 1,200 milligrams per day as well. So some common food sources of calcium include things like dairy, canned fish, leafy greens, lots of fortified plant milks, nuts, seeds, and legumes. To recognize what about a 300 milligram serving of calcium would be about a glass of milk, 3/4 of a cup of yogurt, 1.5 ounces of cheese, a 3-ounce can of salmon with the bones, and then many servings of plant foods per day, including those leafy greens, nuts and seeds, beans, and legumes. So it's important to reflect on how much dietary calcium that you're actually consuming to determine whether or not you're meeting your calcium needs and whether or not a calcium supplement might be recommended. If you're ever unsure, these are some common questions to ask yourself to determine whether or not a calcium supplement might be needed. So, do you avoid or do you not consume dairy on a regular basis? So, about a glass of milk per day, that would be regular calcium intake. Do you have a bone disorder? So something called osteoporosis? Do you have any thyroid disorders? Are you a female over the age of 50 or are you a male over the age of 70? So if you answered yes to any of those questions, adding a calcium supplement might be important to ensure that you are meeting your calcium needs. Something to think about is that it's important to limit your supplement to about 500 milligrams maximum per dose. So if you're recommended a high dose supplement of calcium, it's important to split that up into about 500 milligram doses. And that's because the body can only absorb so much calcium at one point in time. So spacing it out allows the body to absorb the proper amount of calcium. At the end of the day, if you're ever unsure, it's always important to consult with your doctor or a dietitian before taking a calcium supplement, especially if you have other conditions that might interfere with a calcium supplement. So, when in doubt, ask your doctor to help to determine whether or not a calcium supplement would be right for you. Another very important nutrient when it comes to cardiovascular health and health overall is vitamin D, which is also known as sunshine vitamin. So vitamin D is a type of fat-soluble vitamin that helps the body to absorb calcium and phosphorus and other vitamins which are very essential for overall health. It helps to promote calcium absorption, which helps to support the bones. It's involved in hormone production and function. It may also help to protect against low mood and also those depressive episodes. So recommendations of vitamin D for adults up to 70 years is roughly 600 international units per day, and that increases to about 800 international units per day once adults hit the age of 70 years old. Now, our bodies produce vitamin D when our skin is exposed to sunlight. However, you can also get some vitamin D sources through food, things like egg yolks, salmon, tuna, sardines, trout, and also some fortified plant milks. However, many people do not get enough vitamin D through food. So that's when sunshine vitamins come in. So that's where making sure to get enough sun exposure. However, during the winter months, that becomes very, very hard for Canadians. So that's when a vitamin D supplement might be recommended. Consider adding a vitamin D3 supplement. Roughly about 500 international units will help to support your vitamin D intake, unless it's been otherwise prescribed or advised by your primary care provider. So now we're going to get into the topic of reading nutrition facts labels. So reading nutrition facts labels on the back of food products helps us to make informed choices about the foods that we eat. It gives us the opportunity to compare nutrient content of very similar food products, but it also gives us the opportunity to monitor certain key nutrients that have more of a direct impact on metabolic health. So things like sugar, sodium, saturated fat, trans fat, and fiber, which is actually a very beneficial nutrient. So as I mentioned, nutrition facts labels can help us to understand what's in the food that we eat, but also to help us make healthier choices when it comes to choosing foods at the grocery store. One of the most important things to be aware of when it comes to reading nutrition facts labels is the serving size. So all of the nutrition information on the label is based off of this amount of food. So if you eat more or less than the serving size, those numbers will change. Next are the calories, which tells us how much energy we get from one serving of that particular food. And then we get into the fat category, where we want to be more aware of the type of fat. So things like saturated fat and trans fats are the type of fats that have more of a direct impact on cardiovascular health. And then we get into the carbohydrate category, being aware of things like fiber, which is a very important nutrient because it helps with digestion, gut health, it helps to keep us feeling fuller for longer, and it helps prevent a lot of chronic diseases as well. So as much as possible, trying to choose foods that are higher in fiber in order to support your metabolic health. Then we get into the sugar category, and as we know, since too much added sugar can increase the risk of metabolic disease like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, it's important to be aware about how much sugar is in some of these food products. Then there's sodium, which shows us how much salt is in a particular food item. So eating too much salt can impact cardiovascular health, so it's important to choose foods that are lower in sodium. And then we have the percentage daily value, which is a quick tool that helps us to tell if a food has a little or a lot of a nutrient. So I had mentioned that the serving size is one of the most important things to look at when it comes to reading nutrition facts labels. And that's because the serving size tells us the amount of food that all of the nutrition information is based off of. So the calories and the nutrients that are listed apply to one serving of that particular food. So if you eat more or less than this amount, those nutrition values will change. So let's say you eat 1 cup of cereal as opposed to a half of a cup. Remembering to double the amount of calories, double the amount of fiber, double the amount of sugar in order to determine how much you're actually consuming. Then we can take a look at the percentage daily value. So this shows how much of a nutrient one serving provides compared to the amount that we need in a whole day. So a helpful guide is generally anything 5% or less means that the food has a small amount of that nutrient. And anything 15% or more means that the food has a high amount of that nutrient. So we usually want higher percentage daily values for things like fiber and protein, but lower percentage daily value for things like sugar, sodium, and saturated fat. So now let's compare two options of crackers that you can find at the grocery store. So starting with cracker A, we see that one serving, about 9 crackers, provides 90 calories, 2.5 grams of saturated fat, 275 milligrams of sodium, 1 gram of fiber, and 0 grams of sugar per serving. And then we have cracker B, which provides about 4 crackers per serving, which is giving 85 calories, zero point 0.3 grams of saturated fat, 90 milligrams of sodium, and 3 grams of fiber. So remember, a quick rule of thumb would be to look at that percentage daily value. So if we look at cracker A, we can see that the saturated fat and the sodium has a higher percentage daily value than cracker B. So in this case, cracker B would be the better option because it's lower in saturated fat, lower in sodium, and higher in fiber. So what about reading the ingredients lists on the back of your favorite food products? So reading the ingredients lists can be a great tool, especially if you have an allergy, you have an intolerance, maybe you're unsure if the product has any added sugar or not, or you're unsure if the product has trans fats or not, or maybe you're just curious about what your food is made out of. Some of the things to look at more specifically when it comes to reading the ingredients lists are things like the word ose or syrup or nectar, because these types of words indicate that there is some added sugar in there. Also, hydrogenated oil or vegetable shortenings generally indicate that there is a trans fat in this food product. And then looking for that word sodium, which indicates that this food product has some added salt in it. So now, based off of this ingredients list, I want you to think about what this food product could potentially be. So looking at the things in the yellow, which indicate there are some trans fats and some saturated fats in this product. The things highlighted in green indicate that there's some added sugars in this, and then the red being added salt. I would also like to note a quick hint. The word raisins might give you a little bit of a hint in order to determine what this food product could potentially be. So maybe you guessed a cinnamon raisin bagel, or maybe raisin bran cereal. Very close, but if you guessed a butter tart, then you are correct. Very delicious Canadian delicacy, but much higher in those sugars and saturated fats because they are a baked good. So now let's take a look at the nutrition facts label on a delicious butter tart. So we can see that per one butter tart, it provides about 370 calories, 17 grams of fat, 6 of which are saturated fat and 0.1 being from trans fats, about 190 milligrams of sodium, 51 grams of carbohydrates, 1 gram of that being from fiber, and 22 of that being from sugar. So as I mentioned, instead of focusing on those numbers, looking at the percentage daily value. So we can see that fat, 26% is well over that recommended guideline of 15%. So you know that this product has a lot of fat in it. We also have carbohydrates, 17% of your daily value, particularly in those added sugars, because we know that this food product is sweet, so it's going to be having a lot of extra added sugar to it. So because the fat and the sugars are higher than 15% daily value, we know that this is a product that you would want to choose only on occasion and enjoying once in a while, as opposed to something that you would want to have on a regular basis. So just some food for thought. So as much as nutrition facts labels help us to identify products with lower sugar, lower saturated fats, and salt, it's important to be mindful that it's really the foods with no labels whatsoever, or those whole foods, that are the best to choose most often. So those single ingredient foods, those whole foods, so things like lean proteins, nuts and seeds, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, all of those provide the body with more fiber, more protein, and more micronutrients, which is what you want the majority of your diet to come from, as opposed to more of those processed or ultra processed foods, which have more of an impact on metabolic health. So now we're going to get into the topic of eating well for exercise. Now, staying active and eating healthy are both important for a strong and healthy body. And unfortunately, you can't have one without the other if you want to feel your best. Exercise helps to build strong muscles, it improves your heart health, it helps to boost energy, and it also supports mental well-being as well. It lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes as well. However, being active isn't enough on its own, so your body needs to make sure that it's getting the proper nutrition in order to perform well and recover well after exercise. Eating well before and after exercise helps to prevent a number of things, including dizziness, fatigue, upset stomach, headaches, muscle cramps, and soreness. So, a healthy snack before working out gives your body the fuel it needs, and eating after exercise helps to repair those muscles and restore that energy. Eating the right foods before exercise gives your body the energy that it needs to perform at its best. So, before a workout, try to mainly focus on carbohydrate rich foods because those are your body's main source of energy. Thinking about adding a small piece of protein with it can also help to support your muscles. So ideally, you want to aim to eat a larger meal about 3 to 4 hours before exercise. This meal could include things like whole grains, lean proteins, and vegetables, and making sure to have that within that 3 to 4 hours before exercise to give your body enough time to properly break down and digest that food. If your exercise session is a bit sooner, have a smaller snack, ideally 1 to 2 hours beforehand. This could include things like whole grain bread and peanut butter, Greek yogurt, a tuna or salmon sandwich on whole grain bread, or even just an apple with peanut butter. Choosing foods that are easy to digest helps to prevent any of that abdominal discomfort, shortness of breath, nausea, fatigue, and avoiding those heavy and fried foods or even very, very large meals before exercise can prevent any of those things. So, proper fueling before exercise helps to maintain steady energy levels, supports your heart function, reduces the risk of dizziness, fatigue, or those blood sugar drops during your exercise. So, what you eat after exercise is just as important as what you eat before exercise. And that's because it replenishes all of the energy that your body has used during exercise and helps to support a safe recovery as well. So, when it comes to a balanced meal, you want to focus on a balanced meal post exercise, which is made up of three key parts. So, things with carbohydrates to restore that energy level. So, things like whole grains, fruits, and those starchy vegetables. You want to include something with lean protein to repair those muscles that were used. So, things like chicken, turkey, fish, eggs, or even a lower fat yogurt. And then including your vegetables and healthy fats to support those vitamins and support that fiber intake. So things like leafy greens, broccoli, avocado, olive oil, or even just a handful of nuts. So eating a balanced meal is important for several other reasons. Firstly, it restores your energy. So during exercise, it uses up your body's stored fuel, and those carbohydrates help to refill that so that you feel nice and strong and alert and have lots of energy. Also, it repairs and maintains your muscles, so that comes from the protein. And protein provides the building blocks your body needs to recover, maintain your strength, and function over time. And then third, it supports your heart and overall health. And that comes from the vegetables, fruits, and healthy fats, which give your body those essential nutrients that help your heart, your blood vessels, and your immune system to work properly. They also help reduce that inflammation in the body and help to keep your blood pressure in a healthy range. Also, it promotes safe recovery and reduces any of that discomfort. So, eating the right foods can help prevent fatigue, dizziness, low blood sugar, and then that muscle soreness, which is commonly occurring after exercise. And then finally, it helps to maintain long term energy balance. So, consistently eating balanced meals after exercise can help you develop healthy eating habits, avoid overeating later in the day, and helps to support long term health. So, remember, a balanced meal post exercise isn't just about filling up, It's about helping your body to recover, stay strong, and keep your heart nice and healthy. Staying hydrated is an essential part of safe and effective exercise, especially when it comes to cardiovascular health. And water specifically helps your heart and your muscles and your entire body to work properly. So, if you're drinking enough fluids, that's going to help your heart to pump blood throughout the entire body and the muscles to contract during movement a little bit more effectively. When you exercise, your body also loses water through sweat. So even mild dehydration can make you feel tired, can make you feel dizzy, lightheaded, and can make your heart work a bit harder than you really want it to. That's why drinking enough fluids before, during, and after exercise is very, very important. So here are some key points to remember. Before exercise, drink water in the hours leading up to your exercise session to start the day off well and hydrated. During your exercise, take small sips if your session is longer than 20 to 30 minutes or if you're sweating a lot. After exercise, it's important to replenish those fluids that you lost during exercise through sweat, just to help your body to recover and to maintain that blood pressure. One thing to check if you're ever unsure about how hydrated you are, just look at the color of your urine. A more pale yellow would indicate that you're well hydrated, while a darker yellow would indicate that you may be a little bit dehydrated. So general guidelines for fluid intake is roughly around 6 to 8 cups of water per day, which is also equal to about 1.5 to 2 liters of water. Now, proper hydration helps to make you feel more energized, reduces that risk of dizziness or fatigue, and also supports your health and muscles during and after exercise. Now, remember, water isn't just for thirst, it's essential for recovery and safe physical activity. So, depending on what your recommendations are, you may or may not have been given a fluid requirement by your provider. It's important to stay within that, but you want to make sure that you're getting at least that recommended amount, whether or not it's more or less than that 1.5 to 2 liters of water per day. So which fluids are the best to choose when it comes to staying hydrated? So when it comes to hydration, water should be the number one drink of choice most of the time, especially because water is calorie free, there's no extra sugar in it, and it is essential for the body to function. Also, milk is a great option for hydration and fluids, also because milk contains extra protein, it contains some calcium, also lots of other vitamins and minerals, but it also contains some water as well. Coffee and tea, I know sometimes people think that coffee and tea does not contribute to your fluid intake or your hydration, but coffee and tea is actually another great way to get in a little bit of extra water because often coffee and tea is made with water. It's also very high in antioxidants, which are great to help to reduce inflammation in the body. So if you're drinking, as I mentioned previously in the presentation, 3 or 4 cups of coffee or tea per day, especially if it is a lower caffeine version, you're likely getting more antioxidants and a little bit more hydration from water that way as well. And then fluids that you would want to have a little bit less often. That includes things like those sports drinks. So electrolyte beverages, Gatorade, Powerade, BioSteel, those types of things, especially if they are the full sugar version. So they have added sugar in them. Those are ones that you would want to choose a little bit less often. Fruit juices, again, because of that sugar, it would give you a little bit of extra water, but it's more so the sugar that's a bit more of a concern. And then again, things like pop, again, relating to that sugar, but also because it's a source of caffeine. So I mentioned previously that about 400 milligrams of caffeine is generally the guideline. So if you're drinking pop, that's adding to your caffeine intake and it might put you over that 400 milligrams per day. So in order to support your heart health, your energy, and your overall recovery, it's important to make heart healthy choices every single day. So let's go through some of the key habits that I want you to think about every day when it comes to choosing heart healthy choices. So number one, choosing more whole foods. So again, focusing on fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes. Again, because these foods are packed with fiber, vitamins and minerals, which are going to help your heart, going to help to regulate your blood sugar, going to help to keep you full and energized, and support your health overall. Also, if you're choosing more whole foods, you're likely to reduce that intake of packaged foods and more of those ultra processed foods. Number two, reducing your alcohol intake. So, limiting alcohol again protects the heart, helps to maintain a healthy blood pressure, and reduces the risk of complications, especially with cardiovascular disease. Even small reductions can make a big difference over time. So, at the end of the day, less alcohol is best. Number three, try to include more fatty fish, so foods like salmon, mackerel, sardines, and trout. Again, because these provide your body with those omega-3 fatty acids, which are going to help to support your heart, reduce inflammation, and can improve your cholesterol numbers as well. So try to include fatty fish in your meals a few times per week. Number four, add more calcium-rich foods. Calcium is important again, not only just for the bones, but for your muscle function and your heart rhythm. So try to include a bit more dairy products. If you're not a dairy person, choosing fortified plant-based milks, adding in more dark leafy greens like kale and broccoli, spinach to help to support your calcium intake. Number five, consider a vitamin D3 supplement. Again, vitamin D helps your body to absorb that calcium. It supports your bone and muscle function and may even help with heart function as well. So many adults benefit from a daily dose of around 500 international units of vitamin D3 per day, but always follow your doctor's guidance before starting any supplement, but something to think about, especially when it comes to those winter months as a Canadian. And number six, drink more water. Staying hydrated helps your heart and your muscles to work efficiently, helps to reduce any fatigue, and supports recovery, especially when it comes to exercise. So, water is always the best choice, and you should aim to sip water throughout the day to get to that 6 to 8 cups minimum per day. So, by combining these habits, you are fueling your body with the nutrients it needs, supporting your heart, and improving your energy and overall well being. So, remember, small, consistent changes over time make the biggest difference. Setting goals is a great way to stay motivated and make real progress in your heart healthy eating journey. So, one of the best ways to set goals is by using the SMART approach. And SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So, starting with specific, your goals should be very clear and precise. So, instead of saying, I want to exercise more, say, I want to walk for 20 minutes, 5 days a week. So, being specific gives your goal direction and it tells you what exactly you are trying to achieve. Then we have measurable. You need a way to track your progress, and this could be just by determining the number of minutes you're going to walk per week, or the number of servings of vegetables you eat, or the number of glasses of water you drink per day. Measuring your progress helps you to see how far you've come, but also helps you to stay nice and motivated. Then we have achievable or attainable. Your goals should be realistic based on your current health and abilities. So, setting goals that are too difficult can be really discouraging. So, it's important to choose goals that are going to be attainable. Ask yourself, is it genuinely possible to achieve this? For example, if you're just starting your heart healthy eating or your heart healthy lifestyle, trying to walk for 10 to 15 minutes a day might be a better first step than aiming for 60 minutes all at once. Then we have relevant. Your goals should matter to you and to your health. So make sure it aligns with your personal priorities, whether or not that's just improving your energy, lowering your blood pressure, or maybe just being able to play with your grandchildren. This goal should be relevant to you and your life. And then lastly, we have time bound. So give yourself a deadline or a specific time frame in order to achieve this goal. So for example, I will walk 20 minutes 5 days a week for the next 4 weeks. So this clear time frame helps create accountability and maybe even a sense of urgency as well. So using this SMART framework helps turn big, general goals into manageable, actionable steps. So remember, goals aren't about perfection, they're about progress. So celebrate small wins along the way and adjust your goals as needed to keep improving your health and overall well-being. So let's look at some examples of goals that people may have. So let's say one of your goals is, I want to lose weight. Now, unfortunately, this is a goal that is non-behavioral. So instead of thinking of it as I want to lose weight, let's focus on some of the small behavioral changes that can contribute to losing body fat or losing weight. So that includes things like eating more fruits and vegetables, reducing foods high in sugar, sodium, and saturated fats, so reducing those ultra processed foods, drinking more water and less of those sugar sweetened beverages, and then adding daily exercise. So if we take I want to lose weight and change that into a SMART goal, it would look something like this. I will lose 5 pounds over the next 8 weeks by walking for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and by replacing the sugary sweetened beverages I drink with water. So that takes I want to lose weight into a specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goal. Maybe a goal of yours is just to eat better. So again, I want to eat better is a non-behavioral goal. So again, focusing on some of those small behavior changes like eating more vegetables, reducing those ultra-processed foods, drinking more water and less of the sugar-sweetened beverages, and adding more exercise. That takes I want to eat better to I'm going to eat at least one whole fresh fruit each day at every meal. So converts that into a SMART goal. As we wrap up the presentation, I want you to remember this. Small changes lead to bigger outcomes. And every healthy choice that you make, whether it's walking a few extra minutes, adding an extra serving of vegetables at your dinner, drinking more water during the day, or even taking your vitamin D3 supplement, it all adds up over time. Now it's your turn to set yourself a SMART goal. Pick one small, specific change you can start this week. Make it measurable, achievable, and relevant to your health, and set a time frame to track your progress. The important thing is to start small, stay consistent, and celebrate your progress. These small steps build habits that improve your energy, improve your health, and your overall well-being. Remember that your health is in your hands, and every positive choice that you make counts. Thank you for listening to part 1 of the Heart Healthy Eating Nutrition Education presentations. I hope you found the information helpful and are starting to think about small steps you can take in order to improve your health. Please make sure you join us to watch part 2, where we'll continue with more heart healthy eating nutrition education tips. Thank you again, and I'll see you in part 2.